This coffee cost $70, and I waited for months to be able to try it. It was roasted by one of my favorite coffee shops, Santa Monica's Good Boy Bob, who specializes in rare and interesting coffees. But the most interesting thing about this coffee is that it might be the key to ending a war. Want to know why? Pour yourself a cup of coffee, subscribe, like, hit that bell, and don't go anywhere. This is Yemen, a gorgeous country on the tip of the Arabian Peninsula, responsible for some of humankind's greatest early discoveries in math and science, and the one-time commercial crossroads of the world. Some of the buildings in its capital, Sana'a, are over 2,500 years old. But this is also Yemen, home to a violent conflict between North and South that somehow has escalated into an international showdown between Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. Since it began in 2014, the Yemeni civil war has devastated lives and brought the nation's economy to its knees, destroying factories, offices, and homes of regular people who were just trying to live their lives. More than half of the population is food insecure, and for many Yemeni people, after missiles or bombs have destroyed the places where they once made a living, the only way to feed their families is to enlist in a fight that has yet to benefit anyone. This country, with so much beautiful history and culture, now struggles with extreme poverty, further crippled by their own unique COVID-19 crisis. This is me, thousands of miles away, safe in my New York apartment, trying a new genetic strain of coffee recently discovered in Yemen that has huge significance to not only the Yemeni people, but the world. Previously on City Boy, we explored the origins of coffee. It's a plant that was discovered in Ethiopia with a cute origin story about a goat herder named Kaldi. Coffee berries were initially chewed as snacks before the plant made its way across the Red Sea to Yemen, where Sufi monks would domesticate the plant, process it, roast it, and turn it into the beverage we know today. Prior to the 1600s, the world's coffee all came from Yemen, through the storied port of Mocha. Around that time, coffee plants and seeds were smuggled out of the country and cultivated in the French Bourbon Islands and India, ending Yemen's 200-year monopoly on the crop. We still refer to coffee from that species as Arabica to this day. Even though most people don't associate Yemen with coffee, it's their number one export after oil, and nearly 1 million people rely on the industry for their income. As you'd expect, production took a dip after the war started. But since 2019, things are starting to turn around, and it's got something to do with this coffee. Most of the coffees we drink are from Ethiopian varieties, or descendants of the plants smuggled out of Yemen in the 1600s. But it turns out there are wild varieties of coffee that we've not been drinking that don't exist anywhere other than Yemen. This coffee is from a new genetic cluster of coffees called Yemenia, and before Good Boy Bob roasted it, a company named Qima Coffee exported it. Well, exported it might be an understatement. Qima has been working to restore Yemen's coffee market to its former glory for a very ambitious reason.
The war was probably one of the principal reasons why we started Qima. And it's also probably the single biggest challenge that we face in the business. As you said, it's complicated, it's local, it's both domestic and global, it's half proxy, quarter sectarian, quarter geopolitical. There's billions of dollars that are being pumped into Yemen to help alleviate pain and suffering, which is critical. But it was also, there's a huge, obvious, apparent lack of slight, not even long-term, like short to medium-term work that is necessary to stop the conflict. A lot of it is driven by socioeconomic reality, right? Many people will fight for an income. Coffee is so widespread in Yemen, and farming is central to Yemen. 70 to 80% of Yemen's population is rural. That was really the idea behind coffee, to give people this physical, tangible vehicle for incomes, and to help them to look forward towards something and actually think of themselves as like, oh, well, actually, I can have a life many Yemenis, unfortunately, today, as sad as it sounds, have just given up on that concept. They just live a stagnant existence at best. At best. At worst, they actually get involved in the conflict.
Before the war started, what had sort of happened to coffee production in Yemen?
At best, stagnation. In reality, serious decline in production. And that was driven by the development of this specialty market and Yemen not really being able to fit into that market. And Yemen wouldn't fit or work in the commercial market because Yemeni coffee is really expensive.
If coffee was going to deliver reliable incomes to Yemeni people, Faris and the team at Qima would need to improve quality and traceability for the specialty market, which meant plants needed more attention. Only the ripest cherries could be used, and processing had to be meticulous to avoid defects and enhance the flavor profile that's unique to each coffee's physical conditions.
We collect red cherry from the farmers. We help the farmers, of course, harvest, how to pick red cherries, how to take care of the trees. And then we have a team that's trained to collect cherries. They're trained to measure bricks. They're trained to check density. They're trained to ensure that the moisture levels that are received are what they should be, and that the coffee is dried evenly throughout the 20 or 40 days or however long it takes. And it's dried in the right environment.
It's taking sort of the traditional processing method and updating it.
You're working with farmers who literally have been working coffee for like 10 generations, and they've taken things from their forefathers and their forefathers and their forefathers. And these things have enabled them to grow coffee in such an extreme environment for 600-700 years. And so there are these really peculiar and particular things around farmers on when they harvest or when they dry, or when they fertilize, and they link it a lot to certain days or the moon. And we're still trying to understand what are the physical laws behind that, what's the logic behind that.
Just by itself, improved Yemeni coffees would likely find more buyers in the specialty market. But Qima also discovered something game-changing when they asked roasters to try their coffees.
You'd see huge differences in profiles. Differences that you wouldn't see in other countries. We'd hear the same feedback, like, wow, this is like 10 different countries in a country. You come to think, well, what could be the drivers for that? It could be differences in microclimate. It could be different growing conditions. And of course, genetics and varieties are of course, another potential variable or driver. And so immediately I was like, okay, so we need to look at this. We need to look at genetics.
Faris collaborated with Dr. Christophe Montignon of RD2 Vision, one of the world's foremost coffee geneticists, on a multi-year study looking at the genetic makeup of Yemen's coffee. The result shook the coffee world. They discovered Yemenia, a genetic cluster of Arabica coffee that had never been documented. For years, it was inside Yemen, flying under the radar.
Those coffee trees, they survived 600 years. Generations and generations of people in Yemen, they have kept those genetic resources.
Not only was Yemenia previously unknown to the world at large, it proved to be of exceptional quality. Qima partnered with the Alliance for Coffee Excellence to facilitate an auction of Yemen's best coffees. They assembled an independent jury of 35 coffee experts from 14 countries to do a blind tasting and scoring of all the coffees. The top 10 coffees were all from the newly discovered genetic cluster.
Well, what we submitted to them was like 200, 300 lots. And out of those 300, I think Yemenia represented 20%. So to have the last 20 of those, the top 10, 100% of the top 10 is Yemenia. Statistically, it's super significant,
The top scoring coffee was sold at auction for $207.15 per pound. And the cheapest of the Yemenia coffees in the top 20 sold for $23.50 per pound. This is incredible news for Yemen's farmers, who now have access to this rare and incredible coffee that won't be grown in the rest of the world for 6 years, given how long it takes to grow coffee. Probably longer because farmers will have to figure out how to grow that best outside of Yemen. But it does feel a little bit like a niche market at those prices.
It's great that the market is willing to buy expensive coffee, but like any other product on a macroeconomic level, supply and demand shift with price points. So if we can lower price points, we'll be able to shift more coffee. If we can shift more coffee, then more farmers are able to benefit. We want to scale this. We don't want this to be like a niche little industry. We want to scale it.
For now, if you want to try Yemenia, it'll likely be pricey. But what does it taste like? I know exactly what Faris meant when he said that people described this as a bunch of different coffees rolled into one. In fact, I initially had trouble describing this coffee. It's so flavorful, and just as it was when I cupped it, it is just like a roller coaster of flavor. There's definitely a like butterscotch type of thing that happens at the beginning. And then it has sort of that like classical, it's got this classical coffee flavor to it, but then at the end of it you get like this fruitiness, like mango, passion fruit, maybe a little raspberry. And it's subtle. It's just, it's nice and it's crisp. It's clean as anything. Like the flavors just come one after the next, after the next, after the next. And there's no muddiness to it. It's, if I didn't know better, I wouldn't know this was a natural coffee. It's so clean. For those of you that don't know, natural coffee has nothing to do with chemicals or anything like that. It just means that the coffee was processed by drying the fruit before the seeds were removed. While my initial experience with Yemenia felt a little bit like a quiz, I had a much more pleasurable experience drinking it the next morning. Morning, friends. Okay, so I'm here and I'm drinking the Yemenia coffee again. And this morning I just made it in my Kalita Wave, much more casual, not sitting trying to do it on camera, trying to, you know, impress anybody with my brewing or tasting skills. And I just really want to say, like, this is a fantastic coffee. I really, really like it, and I'm glad that I'm enjoying it and got it. The thing that I really enjoy about it is that it is subtle. It's super sweet. It's got all these great fruity notes, but it also is like this very kind of traditional coffee. It's got a really sort of traditional profile. It's so fragrant. It fills your mouth. Like, it's just such a vibrant tasting coffee. And it does still have like all those, you know, notes that I talked about yesterday. And I'm gonna say there's some like juicy fruitiness to it, I think, in the cup. Every time you end up saying something like, yeah, there's juicy fruit or Captain Crunch in my coffee, I think you get like a mark down somewhere in a book of like coffee snobbery, coffee pretentiousness. So I'm gonna try to limit those, but it's really, it's there, and it's delicate and it's fruity and it's somewhat traditional as well. I just think I really, really am excited about this coffee and its future. For Yemen, the discovery of this incredible coffee offers a real opportunity to restore their crippled economy. And if that happens, Yemeni people won't have to fight to eat. So this coffee could literally end a war. But that's just the beginning. It also happens that this coffee holds the potential to save the rest of the world's coffees from climate change and diseases. More on that next time on City Boy.